We've had thousands of reports of wolves just over the last 5 years or so. Based on all of our experience as the absolute leaders in wildlife management in the state of Colorado.
You mentioned that there was roughly 6 traveling in that pack, but what's the estimated number of wolves here in the state? Hello everyone, and welcome back to the EHUNTR newscast presented by Vortex Optics. My name is Taryn Hunt and I am your host for today's podcast. Today I sit down with JT Romatzke. JT is a Northwest Regional Wildlife Manager for the Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Our topic today is on the wolves in Colorado, which has been a hot topic across the state and across many other states for quite some time now. I sit down with JT and get the facts behind the wolves in Colorado. Are they really here? What is the Colorado Parks and Wildlife's management plan for these wolves? And how will it affect the big game and other hunting areas that we all enjoy? I want to thank JT for taking the time with me to record this podcast. He was an awesome guest. I appreciate his time, as I know his time is very valuable. If you like what you hear on today's podcast, please hit that like button and please subscribe to our podcast. All right, well, on today's podcast, I have a very special guest, JT Romatzke. Is that how you say it correctly?
That is right.
Oh, man, all right. I got it on the first try. JT, would you mind introducing yourself and let everybody know who you are?
No, I'd love to. Thank you very much. JT Romatzke. I'm the Northwest Regional Manager for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. I live and work out of the regional office here in Grand Junction, Colorado, and have the fortunate opportunities, and I'm blessed to say that I have everything in all of Northwest Colorado. So we manage all the wildlife, all the parks operations, everything terrestrial, aquatic, conservation species, T&E, I mean, you name it, hunting and fishing stuff. And so that's kind of the extent to which I'm engaged in the business here in Grand Junction.
So you were saying that the Colorado split into 4 quadrants, correct, for wildlife managers?
Yeah, that's right. I'm part of the executive staff for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. I'm on the leadership team. There's also 3 of my counterparts. The state of Colorado is split into 4 quadrants, and so all of the operations and management authority of those quadrants falls to regional managers.
Nice. Very nice. Well, JT, first and foremost, I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me and chat about a very hot topic in Colorado. And it's not just us that live here in Colorado that are concerned about this, but I think most people, there's a lot of non-residents that come into Colorado that hunt and are impacted by the wolves that are moving into Colorado. And so I appreciate you taking the time and talking with me about this. I'd first like to start off by talking about the incidents or events that happened in Northwest Colorado regarding the sightings of some gray wolves, as well as that elk that was scavenged. Can you tell us a little bit of the backstory on that?
Yeah, I can absolutely provide some clarity. I think it's such a passionate issue, and no matter who you are or where you're from, we get letters, we get calls from outside of the country, even on people that have a very strong passion of wildlife, let alone wolves. And so it's a very hot topic. What we've been doing here in the state is trying to look for observations, sightings. We've been trying to work with our ag partners, our federal partners, everybody else over the last 15 plus years to really see what's going on with this species and where things are at. We've had thousands of reports of wolves just over the last 5 years or so. We get photos, we get tracks, we get sightings. And every time we do, our game wardens, our district wildlife managers or biologists are out there on the ground trying to follow up on these things. This most recent example started actually back in October with a group of hunters that were hunting in that part of Colorado, and lo and behold, had identified what they thought were at least up to 6 wolves up in that part of the area. They also heard howls that night. The next morning, I believe it was the next day they actually saw them. They were able to get a quick video. That video has been circulating an awful lot on media outlets all over the place lately with those two. And so that was the first. They unfortunately didn't report it right away. We actually discovered it from other folks because of their telling their story about their great elk hunt in Colorado and posting that on the web. And so after some work on following up, that we were able to get them to help us out with some of that information. Here just this last week, we had another call about an elk carcass, and that carcass and tracks and other things appeared as though it may have been multiple canids or dog species that had predated on that and eaten that elk. So again, we went up. This is somewhat close proximity. When I say close proximity in northwest Colorado, it could be 15 miles, and that's fairly close, right? So
right.
We went up there, and we still have an ongoing investigation, so obviously some of that stuff is still not absolute at this point in time. But what I can tell is that, the size of the tracks, the numbers of tracks, the carcass itself, the way it was consumed, everything is very much, in line with what we would suggest as wolf predation. And so we continue to work on that particular issue. But it's a big day to come out and say, we've got a pack of wolves in northwest Colorado, a highly likelihood that it is a pack of wolves. And, for 100% to verify it, of course, then you get into the huge debate of, well, do you have DNA? Do you have this? Do you just have photos? And that's, we're very conservative on what we identify as a particular species or not. And as I'm sure some of your listeners and folks have seen over the course of time in the last 10 years, the 3 or 4 other known verified wolves were those that generally or typically had collars that had come in from Wyoming or other places, or we had, DNA from unfortunate road kills or those kind of things. So this instance is a little bit different, but based on all of our experience as the absolute leaders in wildlife management in the state of Colorado, we are working very diligently to provide facts and not just working from a passionate perspective.
Well, I think a lot of our listeners do come from a passionate experience because we are hunters, and the impact of wolves in other states, we hear the rumors and what's going on with that, and so it really is nice to get some facts. And from what you're saying, it sounds like there are some facts to prove that there are some wolves here in Colorado. My next question to you would be, what are the estimated number of wolves in Colorado? You mentioned that there was roughly 6 traveling in that pack, but what's the estimated number of wolves here in the state?
Well, so again, I'll back up a timeline for you a little bit, and this is some additional information, but over the course of the last decade or so, we've had a few other verified wolves in the state. People will remember that just this last summer, I believe it was in July, that we had credible information that a wolf had come into the state. But these back up all the way to 2004, where we had one that was hit near Idaho Springs. In 2007, we had video from some of our staff in North Park. We've had a whole lot of sightings. This last summer, we had the one individual younger male that had come into Jackson County, North Park, Colorado. That individual is still in Colorado. We've got these other 6. And so, the absolute number, nobody knows. I don't know. I would be absolutely guessing to even suggest something. But what I will say is that, we have more. There's more here. There's no question about that. We also have a lot of hybrid type species on the landscape as well. And so to balance that out and be the agency that people actually trust and has the credibility to say yes or no or to verify something, again, we are ultra conservative when we do something like that. And so there's an obvious high likelihood that we have others here in the state.
Wow. Well, it's good knowing. I mean, I love hearing the facts, knowing that those have been identified and that they're here. My next question would be is what, and I know that, you know, wolves are an endangered species. They're managed by federal agencies, and I know the CPW has to manage their piece of it. But what is the CPW's management plan with the wolves, or in managing big game wildlife animals or other wildlife animals in the state of Colorado with wolves coming in? What is that management plan looking like?
That's a great question. I appreciate that. Let me start with about 2004, when then the Division of Wildlife, prior to our merger with state parks, took the initiative through our commission to establish a wolf working group. That wolf working group was a very robust set of folks from all different sides of this issue, from, you know, environmental sides to agricultural producers to biologists to staff to economics folks. So that was kind of the initiation for us to really start to engage in this topic. And that group later, I believe in 2005, came out with what was then the Colorado Wolf Plan. That's still an operational kind of major guideline that we have as an agency. The basis for that was that, you know, we were going to work with legislation to do certain things with wolves. We were obviously going to work with our federal partners, the Fish and Wildlife Service and other entities, but we weren't going to be in favor of reintroduction. We would allow them to come into the state on their own naturally, and when they were here, that would trigger our work with the Fish and Wildlife Service. You already made the point that indeed these species are still managed as an endangered species by the Fish and Wildlife Service. Later on, our commission came up with a resolution to that fact about our stance on wolf management and how we were going to do some of these things, that we would accept the presence of wolves in Colorado, that we would we weren't going to establish boundaries, and we were going to try and work to figure out the plan moving forward. But the resolution itself was done, and then just a couple of years ago in 2016, the commission further took an active role in redoing or reauthorizing that resolution. And so those resolutions stand to affirm our position right now. We don't obviously have any position on the ballot that is here in the state of Colorado. We want, you know, to have the people of the state of Colorado be able to be informed and move forward and vote appropriately on that. Now that we have established packs and other things happening here in the state, you know, the Fish and Wildlife Service has the ultimate management authority over the species, and we will continue to work with them and likely start to reassess our wolf management plan and some of those things to figure out what the course of action needs to be into the future. And obviously ballots and other things will hugely inform the direction we need to go.
I love that. You made some great points in there, especially the fact that, like you said, and not to get too much on the ballot side of things, but us as Colorado residents need to be informed. We need to know the facts, and we're not getting a lot of that from a lot of these forums that we see online, or even some of the articles that we read online. So it's nice to know that the Colorado Parks and Wildlife has had a wolf plan for years. This is not something new. It feels like it's such a new thing that, and it's become such a hot topic in recent years, but it sounds like this has been going on and has been a plan for a long time. I want to move on to my next question for you, JT. As a wildlife manager, like I mentioned in the last question, was, you have to worry about how it affects wildlife in Colorado outside of wolves. So, and in my mind, and a lot of our listeners' mind, is the big game in Colorado. Is there a worry about disease brought in from these wolves? Wolves are a big vector for disease, and is there a worry on your part on how it'll affect other animals in Colorado?
Yeah, that's I mean that's kind of The answer to that is always yes.
Yeah.
We as wildlife managers, well, let me start by saying this. We're managers, right? We're not part of preservation. We're about conservation. We're about the wise use of our natural resources. We manage those resources. We use those resources. And so that's the basis. That predicates who we are. That defines what we do. And disease is a huge thing that we deal with in every species that can be found in the state, whether it's a petition species for listing, whether it's a big game animal, you know about chronic wasting disease and other things. I mean, let's back up to, the mid or early 1900s where, over the last century, Colorado Division of Wildlife, the employees of this agency, the professionals, the conservationists, and when I say conservationists, that includes people like farmers and ranchers. It includes people that are in the timber industry. It includes people that make their livelihood on the landscape, that understand the need for multiple and wise use of our natural resources. There's a clear distinction between that and preservation. And so as you move forward with those pure concepts in mind, and you start to rejuvenate the word conservation in people's mind, you will start to understand some of the basic direction that we take as wildlife managers. So disease is a big thing. And as we do stuff here in Colorado, we have to take that into consideration. We know hydatid disease and other things are on the landscape, chronic wasting disease. We have significant concerns over bighorn sheep and other things. So, the answer to that, quite frankly and simply, is sure. It's an unknown on top of a whole lot of unknowns. And you can have the absolute best science and research in the world, but I will tell you and your listeners that wildlife management is an art. And you can have carrying capacity for tens of thousands of animals. But if you don't have the social capacity for it, or the political tolerance, or the local economic buy-in, you can't sustain those kind of things. And so this is an art form, and what we do is amazing. You look at Colorado in 2020 now, it's incredible. We have more people living in the state of Colorado than Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana combined. And Wyoming has 500,000 people. We have 5.8 million people. We have close to 7 million on any given day just from tourism and everything else that happens in the state of Colorado. And Wyoming has somewhere around 90,000 elk or so, maybe 100,000. And in Colorado, we harvest about 60 to 70,000 a year. The vast majority of those are harvested right here in the Northwest region. And so we are blessed because we've had incredible wildlife managers. We've built relationships with the agricultural community. We know how to balance these factors, and we've done an incredible job. We have the most diverse, abundant wildlife resources in North America right here in this state, and it's because of that long tradition and heritage of us being the most credible and relevant people on the face of the earth when it comes to wildlife management.
You brought up the point about the big game numbers, in states versus other states. One of the reasons that people say that wolves should come into Colorado is because we have so many animals, big game animals, that this will help kind of reduce those numbers. From what I'm hearing you saying, that's not accurate.
Yeah, you're right. We manage wildlife based on the availability of habitat and forage, the tolerance levels socially and politically and otherwise of what we can handle on the landscape. And we have goals to have abundance of wildlife. And when I say wildlife, it's easy to talk about just elk or deer or trophy things that as hunters we love, but as hunters, we also need to step back for a minute and remember the heritage and tradition of hunting and the value of hunting and what it means. And the fact that we have all these different species is predicated also on the North American model and the fact that hunters and fishermen for the last century or more have paid into conservation. We have all the fisheries stuff, all the threatened and endangered species work, all this other stuff is paid for by hunters and fishermen. And so that's a long-lasting legacy that we should be really proud of. And so I'll start with that, and then I'll move into your question about, ungulates or deer and elk, big game populations in the state of Colorado. And I just told you that we have robust numbers. Are we satisfied with them? No. I mean, we launched the West Slope mule deer strategy about 8 or 9 years ago now, and that was because our mule deer populations are nowhere near what we would like them to be. In fact, we have some very serious concerns about what the future holds for mule deer in the state of Colorado. Is it a disease factor? Likely. Is it competition with elk? Maybe for space. Is it predation? Absolutely. There's predation issues there. We have just factors upon factors, and it's really easy for people to pick and choose which factor they'd like to attack, right? Is it fragmentation that's leading to some of the declines in population for mule deer? Sure, when we're building more houses and we have 5.8 million people, that is a factor. Is that the only factor? It's absolutely not the only factor. And so we have to balance that stuff. Our elk populations, we've got some of the best researchers in the world. And we just started some research here about 3-4 years ago to look at our decreasing cow-calf ratios, especially in the southern part of our state, where, normally we would see 30 to 40 calves per 100 cows, and we're seeing numbers that are in the mid to upper teens down there that are absolutely frightening from a wildlife management perspective. One of the only real growing elk herds right now is up in the Routt County and Moffat County areas, the Bears Ears elk herd up there, and that one is doing very, very well. But so, we've got a lot of animals on the landscape. There's obviously an awful lot of prey available out there on the landscape, and we're dealing with one of the most robust mountain lion populations that anybody's ever seen, and an obvious bear population that, our commission and others are working really hard to see if we can't try and just stabilize those populations. So again, I guess, it's another unknown for a person that's trying to be an artist with wildlife.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think the people that want to introduce wolves back into Colorado, reintroduce or introduce, however you want to word it, have different reasons. And I think that's one of the reasons that they feel like that's one thing that it would do. It would benefit, it would help manage these animals. And it sounds like, like you said, management is an art, and you guys are the professionals doing it. We should allow you to do it in the way that you want to do it. Another thing that people are talking about that'd be a good thing about having wolves come into Colorado is it's better for the habitat and better for the environment. And I'd like to get your thoughts on that and what you think there.
Well, that's a fascinating question, and it goes to this trophic cascade predator-prey relationship and some of the, I will say, theories and ideas out there that additional top-level predators can move these animals more efficiently across landscapes, that indeed riparian areas, willows, other habitats can be regenerated, and you can have better, more sustainable habitats over the long run. I think none of that has been absolutely proven. I know that there is some research here recently that's come out that is talking about over the last 20 plus years not actually being able to prove that in Yellowstone and other places. But I think there's also some truth to some of those concepts. Do elk spend their days down by the riparian areas? Maybe so, with their heads down eating grass. But with 5.7 million people and mountain bikes on every ridgeline in the state of Colorado, I can tell you our animals are moving rapidly all the time. So, some of those things about benefits environmentally or otherwise from individual species, I think I would urge folks to be cautious about ultimately saying that those are factual. I think there's so many different unique things about every, not just state, but county, drainage, mountaintop. We're doing habitat work here in the state of Colorado that is phenomenal, and we're conserving landscapes through our habitat stamp dollars that is acquiring conservation easements and access, and we're doing riparian work, and we should be really proud of that. None of that stuff should stop, and whether or not an individual species can create those for us is something that I certainly can't attest to.
Okay. So is there really, and I know you're not a biologist, you're more of on the officer managerial side of things, but do you see that there is a biological need to reintroduce wolves into Colorado based on what you just said?
Yeah, so let me help you there for a minute. I am a biologist of over 20 years. That's one of the other unique aspects about the state of Colorado is that our wildlife officers, our district wildlife managers, they start as biologists. We hire biologists here for foremost. We take them and we show them how to do law enforcement and other things, education, management, and then bring them forward. So we're really lucky here in the state of Colorado to have what we consider multi-purpose district wildlife managers. And so each of those individual people are indeed biologists first and foremost. They are the experts at the ground level on everything that has to do with wildlife. We also have a terrestrial branch of biologists and also an aquatic branch of biologists there. And again, just to reiterate, we have absolutely the best, most robust research group that anybody can find in North America. And so we are all biologists working to move wildlife forward and meet the demands and overcome some of the obstacles that we face here in the state of Colorado.
Wow, I was not aware of that. And in fact, I've had the opportunity to talk to quite a few of officers, and I'm always amazed at how much they know. And that actually makes a lot more sense now, knowing that they all are biologists to begin with, and that makes a whole lot more sense. But okay, so do you see a real need to reintroduce wolves, or do you feel it be more the opposite, more of a detriment?
Well, I think I'm pretty neutral on that. I'm not against wolves, and I'm not necessarily for wolves. I'm right in the middle of, I respond. I work on behalf of the citizens of the state of Colorado. And as we move forward and we consider reintroductions and other things, we as an agency then will step back and we will be the professionals and figure out what those habitat limitations are, what that carrying capacity could look like, what those locations might be. We'll be the ones, fortunately or otherwise, that will work through the political conundrum that we'll be faced with counties and other folks to try and figure some of those things out. And I think, biologically, we can sustain an awful lot of things here in Colorado, and wolves very well could be one of those things. But that's something that I've not completely looked at. It's not really a question of want or don't want. We anticipate that they're going to be in the state, and I've already talked about the fact that we have wolves here in Colorado right now. And so our main job is just to prepare for their arrival and figure out how we sustain our credibility and make sure that we continue to be the experts in this, in wildlife management here.
That's a wonderful approach, I think, because like you said, they're coming, and it's just how do we prepare for them. I absolutely love that approach to it, and I'm similar, and I don't have a yes or no. I know there's wolves here already. I know the impact of them, but yeah, if we can do everything we can to prepare for them and allow you all that are professionals and are the artists behind this, allow you to manage the wildlife as a whole in Colorado as wolves are introduced, I think that's the best way to go about it. I want to ask one more question before I let you go. Obviously, we have Mexican wolves in southern Colorado. With the gray wolves moving in up north and the Mexican wolves down south, do you see that being a conflict? Is there going to be any kind of problems associated with those two wolves being in the state?
Well, that's a really fascinating question. So here in the state of Colorado, we don't have any Mexican wolves that we are aware of.
Okay.
Does that mean absolutely not any? I won't say that, but we don't have any that we're aware of. The Fish and Wildlife Service has that I-40 kind of northern boundary for that species. the second reaffirmation of our commission's resolution in 2016 was based on some of that discussion and or debate with some of the groups that would like to move those wolves into southern Colorado, and also Arizona and New Mexico and the Fish and Wildlife Service. And so then Governor Hickenlooper supported this resolution and said, this is not what we want to do at the time. There's obvious differences in genetics there. And I think from some of the groups that are pushing really hard to get northern grays into Colorado, this is almost like a continental connection that has never been done before with restoration of wildlife species. And so if you can bring them back from Canada and all the way down to Mexico, that's a pretty incredible feat that they would have accomplished. In the aquatic realm, as an example, we have a trout, but then all of a sudden, as you do genetics, you'll find out there's 4 or 5 different strains genetically of that trout. And so from the Endangered Species Act perspective, which ones are endangered, which ones are threatened, or are they all now endangered or threatened, or are they, how are we going to manage those things? If gray wolves, these much larger ones, come into the state of Colorado, into the upper parts here, and then move south and integrate with those southern Mexican wolves, from a purest biological standpoint, there's some major ramifications there. So, I think that's kind of the way I would address that question, and I'll leave it with that.
Okay. Yeah, kind of cross that bridge if and when it happens. And again, you hear those rumors of there are Mexican wolves in southern Colorado, and it's nice to hear from your perspective that is not a proven fact, that there haven't been any in southern Colorado. So I appreciate that. JT, before we go, is there anything else that you would like our audience to know about the wolves that are coming into Colorado, or how we should prepare as hunters, or how we should have kind of our mindset around this? Any other items that you would like to talk about?
Well, one of the things that I'll throw out there is I'm struggling with the confidence, the idea of confidence in our agency. And, as I travel around the state and other places, I hear from all sorts of people that, they've seen them or whatever, and they don't want to report them to us. They don't want us to know what's going on. We are taking an approach at this thing, just like all the other wildlife species we have, that we are the fair and balanced people that are trying to manage wildlife and make sure that we're doing the right thing for people and for wildlife. And so I would ask, people, if they're out there, we have evidence of it, we have photos, we have other things that can document it. We would like to know. It helps us, and it also helps these individuals and or packs or other things as they come into the state, so that we can start to address issues and get ahead of things and be proactive and not just reactive to everything that we're dealing with. That's one of the big things. We pride ourselves on over 100 years of managing wildlife in the state of Colorado. We pride ourselves on the fact that we brought elk back to the state of Colorado. We pride ourselves on the fact that we have turkeys everywhere, and that was done from our agency. We pride ourselves in the fact that we have some of the most incredible bighorn sheep populations anywhere, and that was done by trap and transplant, moving those animals and identifying new range. And you can look around this entire state and see incredible success stories of what our wildlife management has done for the state of Colorado. And so credibility is another big one. And we need to maintain that. At the end of the day, we're going to be the ones left standing and trying to make sure that we maintain that credibility and that we can sustain our agency and maintain the livelihood of outfitters, the hunters on the ground, agriculture, and again, the wise use of our natural resources. And that's the ultimate goal here for us.
When I want to drive home, and I know we've said it a couple times here on this podcast, that you guys you're the professionals here, you're the artists in this field, and and you need to know about things. So I agree completely that that's what we should be doing, is letting you guys know, bringing it to your attention. And it is so nice and refreshing to get some facts on this matter, because again, you see forums out there, you see Facebook group messages going back and forth, and the drama that goes on with those, and it's really nice and refreshing to get some facts on the matter and get the truth behind it. So GT, I really appreciate you taking the time with me today. I know that you all are very, very busy and have a lot to do, and so, but it's nice getting, like I said, getting the facts out to people and letting them know the truth behind things. So thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, likewise. I appreciate the opportunity, and we relish this. We're happy to talk with folks. That's what we do. When we don't have the answer, we're going to tell you we don't know, and we're going to try and keep pushing forward and figuring things out. And to be challenged on things it only makes us better too at the end of the day. And so I appreciate all of your listeners. I appreciate the residents of the state of Colorado and other places that are either engaging in this or trying to get some clear understandings of some of the information out there. And so that's, hopefully we can help in that way.
Well, I think you are. I've learned a ton just in our 30-minute conversation today, and I know that our listeners will as well. So, well, JT, I will let you go. Again, appreciate your time. Appreciate all that you and the Colorado Parks and Wildlife officers, biologists, everything that you guys do. I believe today is Officer Appreciation Day. So thank you to you and to all of the employees and everything that everybody does. So appreciate it, and have a great day, man.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll see ya.
Thank you all for listening to today's podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to our podcast. Also, please subscribe to our other social media platforms. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Thank you all.